Hello. For my accessibility evaluation, I'm going to evaluate my Canvas page that I have for my fourth grade students, as well as a Google Slides presentation that I use to teach writing. So I'm going to start with the Canvas page, and I was excited to do this because I've really struggled organizing my Canvas page. And it's tough because in fourth grade, they don't really use it all that often. I'm not an online teacher. It's really just there for me to put on resources and links when I want the students to go to a website that they don't have access to on their computers already. So you're going to see as I go through this, but it hasn't been a huge priority of mine, and there's many, many things that I am already writing down that I should be changing for next year, as far as accessibility goes and just organization for the kids and myself. So this is my homepage that I'm going to start with, and we can already see right at the top that I got lazy and just threw links up here instead of putting them in their proper pages. And this would be an accessibility issue if a student is using a screen reader and the screen reader would start reading these links, and then it would go into these buttons, and the student would probably be very confused, as you might be just looking at it, because it doesn't really look very coherent. So definitely I should start with a heading, or at least I have my Miss Hunsicker's fourth grade. I would put my links into the buttons that they belong. The next thing I see immediately is the color contrast and the font choices that I made. To be honest, the reason I use these black and white buttons in this font is because I get a free bundle of buttons that I didn't have to create, and I had all the buttons I needed, so I just used those and put them on here. But it's definitely tough to read, especially with this white scribble in the background here, reading Welcome to Fourth Grade. Welcome and grade are written in cursive, and all of the buttons really are written in a font that is not very accessible, and some of the writing is very small for students with visual impairments to see. So in addition to that, none of these images on here have alternative text descriptions, so a student using a screen reader would not be able to figure out which button is which really defeats the purpose of the entire Canvas page. Alright, the next thing that is not accessible, and I will get into the things that are accessible in a little bit, is the clear and consistent navigation that I should be using on my Canvas page. Like I said, fourth grade, we don't really use Canvas that much. Most of it is just resources. So if I click homework, it will take you to just down PDFs of the homework in case they forget their packet at school, or their family wants to see it, or I have the answer keys on here for their family as well. However, with that being said, these links at the top make this not very consistent, and certain assignments I got lazy with. Again, the science, we flip-flop science and social studies, so that science should actually be social studies. They need to click science to get into social studies. This heading is all wrong. And some of these links just are thrown here without any rhyme or reason. I used to date them and put them under the units. As you can see, I did that for Unit 2, but then I really just stopped doing that, which is terrible as I'm looking at this. Definitely inaccessible. And then finally, the last inaccessible thing I want to talk about for my Canvas page is the order of the buttons. This isn't really anything I can control, but as I'm tabbing through to see what would be read first with a screen reader, the side here where it says account, dashboard, courses, calendar, inbox is read first. Then it would go into all of these things on the side here, home, grades, ed puzzle, all of these blue buttons over here. Then it would get into actually the content of the page. So if a student was visually impaired and was completely relying on the screen reader, it would take them forever to actually get into the content of the page. I'm not sure if there is a solution to that, something I definitely want to look into. Alright, so some things that are accessible on my Canvas page. Whenever I link something, I don't just type in the link. I will always embed the link, I'll hyperlink it, and I will call the link whatever the link is. This says link to virtual class with Ms. Hunsicker. When they click this, it will open up my Teams meeting. So all of the links are described and embedded into the pages. I also do have video captions. There's not any videos here on the homepage, but all of the videos that I have on this page are usually YouTube videos, and they do have closed captions. We always use closed captions in class as well, just for people not necessarily hard of hearing, but just so people have multiple means of interacting with the content. Another accessible thing for my Canvas page is that there is no flashing or blinking anywhere on this page. It is all of the fonts outside of what I just talked about. All of the font is easy to read and appropriately sized. And also all of the material on here is, it will take you to accessible software and technology programs. So all of the things on here will take the students to something they know how to use or have access to. I don't have anything on here that would be inaccessible because we are a one-to-one district, so all of the students have access to their Chromebook and all of the sites that we use in our district. So that is my Canvas page. Lots to work on for next year, and I definitely want to clean up these buttons and really trying not to stay lazy or not to be lazy with when I get to the end of the year and I have so much going on, just throwing things on here and keeping it all organized. The next thing I want to look at is a Google Slides presentation. This is a presentation I used for writing. This was actually created not by me, but by an instructional coach in my district, and it was sent out to all 4th grade teachers, and we are not required, but really strongly encouraged to use it. Which is interesting because there is a lot of issues with accessibility here on this Google Slides. So I'm going to start here with some inaccessible features that I see on this Google Slides presentation. Starting off on Google Slides, there's no outline view to look at, to examine. So the first thing I see is that none of these images that are embedded into the slides have alternative text. Again, I did not make this, but I checked every image. None of them are described. And most of the images in here are screenshots of a writing packet that the students would already have a paper copy. But if I have a student who is relying completely on the digital version, or if I need to teach this digitally for some reason, and I have a student with a disability, and is relying on something like a screen reader, they wouldn't be able to see their physical copy either. So definitely the pictures should be described. Kind of going along with that, many of the images on here are very small or hard to read, or there's just so much. And I honestly ran into this when I was using this slideshow to teach too. I kind of changed it around a little bit. But for example, this image looks exactly the same, and except we have this one is filled in, so there's a lot of information here, and that the screen reader would not be able to read this information because this is just a picture. Now over here we have this highlighted in a red box, but again, color, we should not just rely on color to convey any sort of meaning, and obviously this red box is trying to convey that the students need to do this section of the graphic organizer. I also checked the reading order of many of the elements on these slides, and many of the elements are off. For example, if I tab through, it will go through this, or it will like click on this picture first, and then it would go on to this little bubble. But when we read it, we would obviously read this bubble first and then talk about this picture. And on many pages, that order is off, probably due to the fact that this coach who made this put the elements in an incorrect order, but did not think about that through an accessibility lens. When we get down, and this is a very long PowerPoint or slides because it is used throughout the entire unit to teach students how to write a story. So when we get down into some of the other slides, there's examples of how to write the different parts of the story. But in the examples, there's absolutely no chunking of the text. You can just see from the introduction that it just looks like a huge block of text that I know many students will get overwhelmed with looking at. Not students with disabilities and without disabilities. I'm a little overwhelmed just looking at all of the text on that page. So definitely we could chunk a lot of these texts. I'll give you another example. Here's another example. There's so much on this page that it's almost small and difficult to read. And then there are many slides in here without any sort of without any sort of title or text, just a picture, which obviously is not as accessible as it could be for students who may not be able to see the picture. These, again, I already said this, but these are just screenshots of pages in their writing packet, which is not very helpful for students who cannot use their writing packet. They also have no text, headings, or labels on them, so a student really wouldn't have any idea what this is. Now I want to get into some of the good things about this slideshow. They do use a consistent color scheme throughout the whole slideshow with the yellow background, the white boxes, and the black outlines around the boxes. I think this is very easy to read. There's no sort of contrast issue with our color, and it is consistent throughout. One of the guidelines on the accessibility handbook said that we should use one of Google Slides' pre-made templates or something similar to that, so it is consistent throughout, and this slideshow is consistent throughout. Also, many of the graphic organizers, these are great instructional strategies and practices to make things accessible for our students with disabilities and without, again. So incorporating graphic organizers is great. There's still work to be done with the graphic organizers, but I do think that is an accessible strategy that the teacher used here. Many of these slides, I know I said some of them don't have headings, but many of them do have headings. The ones with the texts, like this says Adventure Story Prompt Review. This says Introducing Your Adventure Story Booklet, Possible Adventure Settings. So there are many headings when they are moving on to a new topic of writing. However, the slides with just the pictures could have headings as well. I think that is all I have for the parts that are accessible. There's definitely more that's inaccessible, which is something that I need to look at and talk to the coach about next year. But the last thing I wanted to add here is at the end, they actually give the students a example story, adventure story that they're creating. And there are pictures, which is really fun for the kids to look at and see and read the story. However, again, now we're getting into more issues because accessibility issues because we have changed. I'm sorry, I'm just flipping. I'm giving myself whiplash here. They have changed the consistent color scheme that we had throughout. They've now changed it to add these pictures. They've changed the fonts. Some of the color contrast here isn't very good. Like we have the green on the green, and we have the green on the green down here as well. And I understand the purpose of these pictures, but for when we're working with students who may be visually impaired or have another sort of disability, this may be hard for them to see. And again, with our chunking of the text, we could have split this up into several different slides. It doesn't all have to be on one slide. So I think that is all I have for my accessibility audit. A lot of room for improvement. So I'm excited to look at, sorry, I'm clicking things randomly. I'm not trying to do this. I am excited to look more into these features and make my materials more accessible in the future.